Hey everybody, how you doing? And it is 9 o'clock, about 2 hours later than I expected to start. But the show does go on, even if it doesn't go on at the time we want it to. But it happens. I have the great rap Nick of several decades, Cindy 62 media vlogger and draft man extraordinaire, Bill Carroll, with me to talk about the Senior Bowl live and also top NFL draft players for 2022. Bill, it's Super Bowl week. How you doing?
Yeah, well, I am trying to write a bunch of things, trying to throw up some videos, and start cranking out. Well, I've been cranking out scouting reports, but I committed myself to do 300 this year, so I've got a lot of work to do. Some of them will be fairly short, but some of them will be longer. So how do I do this to myself? But yes, I've got some things to work on. But it's a great time of year. Like this, for me, this is the most exciting time of year. I mean, obviously, yeah, Super Bowl's cool and everything.
So,
but
folks, we are going to have a Super Bowl party. We're going to have go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that. But for us, for people in the evaluating community, this is really when we switch into high gear. That's all I was saying.
And tell viewers your background with the draft. How long have you been working on the draft, and what drew you to the NFL draft?
So when I was a kid, I just fell in love hard with football. And at first, like most kids, I watched college football and I watched pro football, and I understood they were different and sort of made the connection that guys are in college first and then they go to the NFL. But I didn't really understand the evaluation process and how the two were truly, truly connected. And around probably about 10 or 11, I started reading, Inside Sport Magazine, Street and Smith, a bunch of magazines don't even exist anymore also, sadly, and started getting into the evaluation field. And like you, I started writing NFL teams. And most of them would send you back things like, hey, little champ, keep rooting, or whatever, that kind of thing. But
look at it this way. At least they didn't call you little buddy.
Yeah, right. But one team, I got a letter back that was handwritten. And God, I wish I knew where it was, as opposed to a form letter. And it was from the late, great Bill Nutt.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. And thank God he finally made it into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Should have been in 15 years ago. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. So amongst other things, he told a little bit of the story of how, I never intended to work for the Steelers, never intended to be a scout. And he talked a little bit about his own background, how he was a basketball player at West Virginia A&M, which later became West Virginia State University. And that one of his close friends was Joe Gilliam Sr., obviously the father of Jefferson Street Joe Gilliam, and a man who went on, very good player himself, but went to be on a legendary defensive coordinator for Big John Merritt at Tennessee State. And, it was about probably 3 or 4 pages handwritten. And I wasn't expecting it. It took months. Like, it wasn't like, he got right back to me. I'm sure he was busy, but eventually he found time. And so I treasured that. And a few times we even talked on the phone later. Amazing man. And there should be a 30 for 30 or something about him in particular. Mm-hmm. And so his AFL counterpart, Floyd A.C. Judge Wells with the Texans/Kansas City Chiefs, who broke the scouting color line in that league at some point, should also make the Hall of Fame because he's responsible for Otis Taylor and a bunch of other great players getting to them. But also he was an amazing person, right? He was a friend of Muhammad Ali. He convinced Guy V. Lewis to integrate the University of Houston's basketball team. I mean, he did so much stuff. But back to what we're talking about. So by 1982, I had secured a position. So I had sent writing samples without, I don't think I indicated my age, to a man named James Mims, who had retired from working for the Norfolk Journal and Guide, which was Norfolk's black newspaper, and had started his own small weekly called The Answer newspaper. And, had put out that he was looking for writers. And I sent out some writing samples of, games that I'd, written about and players I'd written about and whatever. And I got hired. And Eventually, I got elevated to sports editor, which simply meant more work, but still working for nothing. But luckily, I was 15 years old, so I wasn't really looking for money. I was looking for experience, and I did that until I finished high school. And I also wrote a little bit for my campus newspaper. Shout out to the hoof rent staff at Green Run High School. But that was sort of the beginning of the beginning. And I wrote because, timing was sort of perfect. I got really seriously into the draft in 1982. And then comes the 1983 legendary draft class with so many great players in it. Everyone talks about the quarterbacks, but I mean, Eric Dickerson is in chop liver. Like, that was a really amazing draft class.
Mm-hmm.
So I fell hard for the draft process. And once again, timing being somewhat perfect, this happened right around the time that people like Howard Balzer, the late, great Joel Buchsbaum, Paul Zimmerman, like that first wave of Jerry Jones, not that guy.
Did I tell you I interviewed Paul Zimmerman at my first NFL draft? Actually,
Cool. That's great.
He was epic interview.
Yeah, he's terrific. He was terrifically knowledgeable. But Joel Buchsbaum to me was like the king. My God, that guy's mind. And speaking of 30 for 30s, they definitely need to do a 30 for 30 about Joel Buchsbaum. But Palmer Hughes, right? And Jerry Jones, right? But yeah, Buchsbaum was my guy, like top of the heap. But there were a lot of really that first generation of draft picks, and then soon after them, you had Mel Kiper Jr. People sort of act like he invented this whole thing. And, he was in the second wave. He was near the first or the second wave, but he wasn't in the first wave. There were guys, Marasco, right? The Marasco brothers, Carl and Arthur Marasco predated Kiper. I mean, Hub Arkush's dad, I forgot his I think it was Art Sr.
Question. On that note, with that idea, I've this back of the head opinion that the NFL is trying to basically kill draft nicks.
Well, maybe at first, but that switched pretty quick. I mean, after a couple of years, you could tell they really embraced, Kiper, I guess, largely. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the hair, they seemed attracted to him for some reason. And I'm not a person who's down on him exactly. I just think there's other people who are as good or better who, for whatever reason, never got the same sort of attention or opportunity that Mel Kiper Jr.
What I mean by that, because I think about Bill Chakas, because I told Bill early on I want to put him out there to compete with and be the next Joe Buchsbaum. That was my idea for putting him on video. But separate from Mel and including the NFL, my impression was, with the exception of the Kiper and ESPN, they wanted to just have them and the rest of us out of the way.
Now that's I don't think they had a thing against drafting. They think they had a thing against independent draftings. Yeah. So I think that was a distinction we need to make. They wanted, especially as the draft became a more and more popular event, they wanted to have, their guys. But yes, the love for independent draftings. Now, what I will say is that if you really hustle and fight and scratch and bite, you can get yourself, even as an independent guy, into a situation where you're getting reasonably decent access to certain events. But they definitely close you out when it comes to some things, and it's invite only or whatever. But, you do what you can do and you fight through what you can. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say, because the draft has become so popular, especially the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, it's been popular for a while, but we've seen it sort of go up and up and up and up and up. Go ahead.
Let me take this from an entirely other angle.
Okay.
The one thing that was really great about New York, you saw the same people every year.
Yes.
But when they started moving around, guess what? You didn't see the same people every year, except the ESPNs, unless you were fortunate enough to go, as I was, to Chicago twice, then Philadelphia. I didn't go to Dallas, but I did go to I didn't go to Cleveland either. But my point, and then of course there was the pandemic. But my point is, I'm going to Las Vegas. But my point is, if you lived in New York and were a draft pick, you had to spend no money save for the ride to Penn Station. And that's it, And to me, that dynamic caused the growth of these powerful New York draft picks, starting with Joel Bushbaum and others. And yet, in my opinion, the NFL could have taken us all with them and said, hey, look, there's a space for you. But what occurred to me in my paranoid view was the case was when they started making the spaces for us to sit at drafts smaller and smaller. In Chicago, for example, we had day one and then day two, and then there was basically day three, there was no place for us to sit. And that was a first. I remember the year that happened. That was 2016. 2016. That was the year 2015. That was the year that happened. There was no place for us to sit, and it just got worse. That's what I'm getting at. So it's like, hey, I feel like we're being squeezed in a sense. That was just my observation.
Yeah, what I would say is the little guys, right? Because for the major players, they've actually increased and improved their access to information. So once again, there's a tiering of it. But yeah, I mean, you and I all remember, I think it was 2003 was the first year that you and I were at the draft together. I think it might have been 2003.
Five.
Well, I was there before then, but I didn't see it. Because at the Javits Center, I was there too.
Right. And this was in fact, this was for me, because I love to have everything online. This was, my first, there it is. This is my first draft. This is what Bill is referring to. I'm going to show you guys in a second what he's talking about, if my system cooperates, as it should. But, I think it's just the idiot at the controls, meaning me. There, okay. BS. There. And, here we go. Yeah, here we go. And where am I going here? Going down to NFL draft, I had a nifty place, not a blog network, not this, at our website to show you that might, here we go. SBS, I have to break that out more. Not the game. Here we go. All right. I'll go here. Okay. This is our special page. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but it's worth sharing with the viewers. Right here. And boom, this is from our sportsbusinesssims.com. This was the NFL draft that's Anya Krutz, another one of our writers when we were Sports Business Simulations. And our first two meetings were at the Raiders office. So this was hence Anya's photograph about the NFL. SBS, the NFL draft is here. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see, probably not. So let me take that, replace this with that, and boom, there that is. And this is my first draft, Bill. Yeah, see that? Javits. I don't know if you can see that or not. I believe, yeah. See that? That's Javits. Let me enlarge that. And somewhere you're mentioned here, a bunch of people. That was the Javits entrance. And this is the main hall right there. This is the back of that was the view from my seat at the back. See? That was my first draft. And I believe this is the first online account ever written about being at the NFL draft. In history. Yeah. Online. In history. And I got that one. There's, let's see, some of these. Yeah, that's draft part 2 here. Recognize these people?
Oh my gosh. Oh.
This is history, folks. This is history. See, there's Bill.
Yep, I see Dr. Jack.
Yeah. This is history. So, this is history. So this is I've got everything chronicled. I got down here. That's
Sugar, the late great.
Yeah.
So,
You know who encouraged me to do that? That was Bill. Because you know how Bill was. Bill, God bless him, would say, "Hey, go down there and get a cigar from Roy Firestone or from Burt Sugar." I said, "What are you talking about?" He hands them out for free. So that's how I got that damn cigar in my mouth. So anyway, so there you go, Bill. There's and you know who that is, right?
Oh wow!
Yeah,
wow.
That's Jay.
How much smaller he was then.
You know what? I ought to put this on Oakland News now and screw it.
You should. A relatively slender Jay Glazer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was how I got to know all you and everybody else. And I don't want to go on too long because that wasn't what I intended. But there you go, Bill.
Yeah.
That?
So to get to sort of what people, I'm assuming, want to hear. I guess I'll start with the quarterbacks, though I hate to do it, but people if they want. The good news for most of the quarterbacks is almost none of them lost the weigh-in, right? There was concern that some of the shorter quarterbacks, so the two shorter ones, obviously, who came in slightly over 6 feet tall, both of them did. Willis and Howell both came in, a fraction over 6 feet. 6 feet and 1/4 for Sam Howell, 6 feet and 3/8 for Malik Willis. And there were people who were worried that they might be under 6 feet. Now, I think that's less of a concern than it used to be. Willis also has pretty, decent sized hands, 9.5 inches. Howell came in at 9 1/8. Anything over 9 is acceptable. They love it if you're 10-inch hands, but that's one of the things with Drew Brees. Drew Brees is also right around 6 feet even, but he has long arms and big hands. Same thing. And of course, obviously Russell's below 6 feet, but he also has big hands and long arms. Willis, arm length, 31 3/4, 31 1/8 for Howell. The other shorter quarterback was Bailey Zappi from Western Kentucky, 6 feet and 3/8, 213 pounds, 9 3/4 inch hands, which is very good, 31 1/4 inch arms. So Kenny Pickett, they weren't able to measure his hands because he has like a double jointed. It sounded a little bit like an excuse to me, but whatever. He has a double jointed thumb, and his thumb, if you try to do the way they measure it, moves a little bit, I guess. Whatever. I still felt a little excusey to me, but he came in at 6'3 1/4, 217, no hand size, shorter arms. I mean, my arms are longer than his, and he's 6'3 1/4, 30 5/8 inch arms. So on the shorter side. For someone that height. Desmond Ridder came in at 6'3", 207, a little lighter than expected. People were thinking he'd be somewhere in the, upper teens to low 220. Nope, 207. But 10-inch hands, which is impressive. 32 7/8 arms. And then Carson Strong, the other taller quarterback, 6'3 3/4, 226, 9 1/4 inch hands, 31 5/8 inch arms. And all of the quarterbacks struggled day one, across the board, every single one. And then there was a jump up day two for both Malik Willis, a bit of a jump for Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's never going to be a guy that wows you exactly. And then Desmond Ridder just got steadily better every day. So when you made notes on Desmond Ridder, it's like, footwork looks better this day. He's getting the ball out of his hands quicker. And by the end of the time, end of the week, it's like, yeah, this guy's looking like the guy I saw during the football season. And by the time he got to the game, he might have been the most impressive quarterback or one of the most impressive quarterbacks. I mean, guess with Pickett that we saw at any point that day. So all of these guys, I think, have the opportunity to be either high-level backups or NFL starters. The concern with Bailey Zappi is arm, right? He does not have a very strong arm. He's got everything else. He's a good enough athlete. I mean, not a guy who's going to beat you with his feet, but he can move around a little bit, extend plays, throws with touch, throws with anticipation. And even though he's in an offense that certainly is very open, like a spread him and shred him, offense, he he operates at a high level, and you can tell that he's capable of understanding things that are more complex in the offense he's currently in. Pickett, of course, a lot of people's QB1 coming into this. If you loved him already, you'll keep loving him. If you didn't like him, you saw good enough. You saw some reasons that would help you to continue to dislike him. He really struggled on the rainy day with lots of things. I mean, you could tell that gripping the ball, especially a wet ball, isn't as easy for him as it is for others. He is a two-glover, right? As they say, like Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves. He's a two quarterback. I don't so much care about that, but some people don't like it. The fact is that I think he has all the things you look for in sort of a middle-of-the-pack starting quarterback in the NFL level. Could he get to the Derek Carr level? I think if he, maxes himself out, he certainly could. I think the floor for him is like Jay Fiedler. So Jay Fiedler to Derek Carr to me feels like his range as an NFL quarterback.
Which one of these is a first rounder?
Sorry, which one of them is what?
In your view,
the one that I would take of the senior.
Which one is a first rounder in your view?
First rounder. Well, I mean, none of them. If I were drafting the first round, I would pass. And then to me, if early in the second, both Pickett and Willis are early second rounders. Carson Strong is like a mid second rounder. And then I would take Desmond Ridder somewhere in the early to mid third. And then Bailey Zappi is like fifth rounder. Oh, forgot.
Wow.
Sorry.
Last time we had a draft like that, I remember. Well, when Davian Clowney was taken, but even the quarterbacks weren't so bad that we didn't have some come off the first round.
Oh, I mean, we would. I didn't. I'm saying me. Oh, two or three of these guys will go in the first. Quarterbacks get pushed up. Remember when Christian Ponder went in the mid first? Remember when EJ Manuel
when he was 10th?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was what? He didn't. He if memory serves, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, people will talk themselves into some nothing special quarterbacks, and these guys at least have more upside potential than either of those two.
Now, who's Christian Ponder now married to at the ESPN?
Samantha Ponder?
Oh, yeah. She was with ESPN, I believe. He met her, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's how they met.
Yeah, and then he quit. So I was saying he didn't last, what 4 years, I guess?
Maybe 5. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't particularly good, and he got hurt on top of that. But it wasn't injuries that once again, I'm not here to judge anybody else's injuries or pain. I believe that if he was having more success, he may have fought a little harder to continue his career. But forgot Sam Howell. Sam Howell to me also.
Friend was Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah, well, Blaine Gabbert is still collecting NFL game checks, or
back Tom Brady. Yeah.
But I forgot Sam Howell. And Sam Howell to me also is a guy who I would take early to mid second. I think almost every single one of these quarterbacks is a project. Now, if I can get a guy like Strong in the late second or a guy like Ridder in the mid third, I'm thrilled, because I think these guys have the potential to eventually be as good as anybody else in the class, even though they might not be ready to play right away. But I think they have really good potential.
Let's talk about Malik.
Sure.
What is it? I mean, first, every time I want to downplay him, and I really don't want to, there's one thing that just strikes me. His delivery. That ball comes out of his arm like it's being shot out of a cannon. And it gets to where it's going in a hurry. And he has the best deep ball throw I've ever seen since Jameis Winston.
And that's the thing that stands out. I mean, he's a really good athlete also, but I think he has a special arm. Maybe not quite Josh Allen level, but not that far off. I mean, maybe not quite there with Mahomes, but not that far off in terms of just pure arm. I think he has the ability, especially if he keeps improving. And I mean, obviously, where you go is everything for any player, really, but especially quarterbacks, because
the talent ecosystem around you and the way that you're being coached, particularly early in your career, are everything. They are going to be incredibly determinant in whether you become good, great, or a bust.
Who do you see getting him? Because I would like to see him behind a player like Patrick Mahomes, or if he were to go to a team that really understood how to work as a mobile quarterback. And that, I mean, how about what say you though?
Okay, so the market for him, I mean, there's lots of teams who I think could end up being interested. I mean, Atlanta could end up being interested. There's a lot of teams that know that their current quarterback, when some places have already made it clear they're moving on from their current quarterback, and some places didn't really have, didn't have what they wanted, at least the quarterback position. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst the places that could be possible landing places, I already mentioned one of them, but I think that it's entirely possible that if Seattle ends up moving on from Russell Wilson, which we've all heard, I don't know how many rumors, lots and lots of rumors about how that could or would happen.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of deals teams might be willing to make for him.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Type your question right here for Bill. If you have a question, just say, hey, Bill, and we'll go from there. Any troll entries will be quickly destroyed.
So the earliest possible landing spot, of course, is Detroit. Now, I don't think Detroit goes that early after a quarterback, and they shouldn't, quite frankly. If they do, I think it's a mistake. We'll see how the Giants have said all the right things about how they feel about, Danny Dimes, right? I don't know. It feels like whistling past the graveyard.
Yeah.
I don't know if they go quarterback this early, but they will at some point.
There are so many people not high on Danny. I don't understand that. I've interviewed him. I met him. He's tall.
He is tall.
Very mannerable.
He's a nice kid. I mean, I don't like him as a person.
And an effective quarterback. I mean, he does have, as they call when skins on the wall. I remember what he did to the Saints last year. They had a great game plan against the Saints. And I understand that he has his moments against a great game plan that knows how to take advantage of his weaknesses. But a great offensive game plan could take those weaknesses away, right? So I just don't get the hate for him.
Well, it's a couple of things.
All right.
The first thing is, if memory serves it correctly, he leads the NFL in total turnover since he entered the league, and that's not something that people love.
He does. He does.
So that's not something that people love. And yeah, he comes across, as you said, as a nice kid, but how do I put this? People want a little bit of a jerk sometimes at the position, or at least a guy that's got a little bit of edge, right? That was a lot of the criticism of Derek Carr. He's kind of like too nice, right? He seemed to have had a little bit of a baby heel turn this season. Remember the press conference where he said, "I don't care about what you think about me or what you have to say." Remember that? I think people liked that.
I hated it. I just wish he just tune out the people and just do his job. And he's making tons of money. He's in a great city. He's got a beautiful family. He's got, sponsorships with the Palms and all this stuff where he did. I don't know how the pandemic affected all that, but I just wish he just kind of like chill out. That's all.
Sure, I get all that, but people liked him because they liked that in him because they said he was a little too milquetoast and all that stuff, and people liked the fact he showed some edge and some fire. I mean, Aaron Charles Rodgers definitely has some big jerk energy to him. At times, even with Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, you definitely got some, a little bit of snark, a little bit of peevishness sometimes. But I think people kind of like that in quarterbacks. And when you look at how people talked about Andrew Luck, no matter how well he played, people would always also talk about he sells a flip phone. He looks like the world's most athletic library sciences major and all that kind of stuff. People said all kinds of little strange things about that.
but it's because he didn't have that quarterback personality, right? God, I was starting to sound like Colin Coward. But the fact is that people don't like quarterbacks to be too nice to some extent. Let me keep going. The next place where I could see a possible landing spot is the Carolina Panthers.
Ooh.
I think the Panthers may, first of all, obviously he's not that far away from them. They whatever. The point is, I'm gonna be shocked if they traded back with somebody who wanted something.
Happens, don't you think he winds up starting?
If he goes there, he has a legitimate chance to start. Yes. I don't know if he starts day one. All these guys are a little raw. If he's starting day one, it means, wow, do they really not like their other options? But I think, he has
is a crowd pleaser who can move the chains and electrify the base, just say.
Right. And that's what people, said when they talked about Justin Fields as well. But people need to remember that college quarterbacks that enter the NFL and are ready to play at a even reasonable level, right, are the exception, not the rule. The rule is they look terrible. The exception is they look okay. And then the super exception is they look really good. But usually, most of the time, rookie quarterbacks, particularly early in their rookie season, look god-awful. So you have to say to yourself, I'm willing to let this kid absolutely stink it up a few times fairly early in the season in order to get what we're going to get to later. I think whatever team brings him in is probably planning to, if not redshirt him, his whole entire first year, at least to, until whenever the bye week rolls around, to have him probably be a backup. But, we'll see. Then next, the Giants, right? The Giants pick a couple of times, early, partially because they're terrible and partially because they made a deal. But once again, I don't think they're quite ready to give up on Daniel. But they've got a decision to make on him, right? Whether to pick up his option, all that stuff. They've got all that stuff to decide on him. And I don't think they're sold on him, and I understand it.
Interesting. Because to me, he seems to have some qualities that could translate into that kind of offense that I think Brian Daboll wants to install.
Well, that's part of why they hired Brian Daboll. Can you fix him? Please fix him, right? And if he does, once again, it'll help to cement the fact that Brian Daboll is one of the best, coaches in the NFL, young coaches in the NFL, especially on the offensive side of the ball. That will be cemented if he manages to get Daniel Jones, to elevate a level or two, perhaps. That would burnish all of his credentials. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, and this is where I feel like is the first really likely spot for whoever the first quarterback off the board is, whether it be Howell, whether it be Pickett, whether it be Willis. I think the first spot where we most likely see a quarterback go is pick 8, and that's the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay.
So
Matt Ryan is in need of a replacement.
Right.
So for them to get a replacement for Ryan was open last year, not this draft. Maybe by free agency, but
well, it comes down to, once again, how they evaluate what they like, what they don't like. But every year that I can think of,
you see them making an emergency play for Jameis Winston just to trip up the Saints.
I don't know. Well, I think if they made a play for Winston, it wouldn't be because they're trying to trip up the Saints. I think it'd be because they really liked him and they saw him as, at least a 5 or 6 year ability. One is he gives stability, right?
Right.
If you make him enough and a contender suddenly needs a quarterback, you might be able to flip him, gotten however many games out of him and still be able to flip him for more picks, maybe. But it depends on where Jameis lands and what goes on around him. But I think that much like we're seeing now with Matt Stafford, I think a different and better situation, which he had, right, will help him to look better. So if on the Jameis side, I would look for a contender, a team with a good offensive line, and, a place where even if the team isn't right on the precipice of winning, there's a culture in place that players, coaches, etc., all are willing to make the sacrifices that will help you to win. And that's sometimes the hard thing to look for, because everyone says that they're all in, right? I mean, whoever says I'm only 57.5% in, right? Right? You never hear, someone say, everyone always says they're all in. But what you find out obviously is in, conditioning preseason and then when the season begins. A few other teams. Right after them is the Denver Broncos. Now, they have a decision to make. This is going to sound like a broken record. What to do with their young quarterback in terms of, are you going to franchise him? Are you going to, try to renegotiate a longer term deal? I mean, they have something they got to figure out with Locke. So that'll be interesting how they figure that out. And where does Teddy Bridgewater land and with whom? That brings us to the Jets. The Jets are set at quarterback. We talked a little bit about Seattle. Seattle certainly could bring in a quarterback, even if they did retain Russell Wilson. But if Wilson's gone, which I think is fairly likely, I get that slightly over 50%, I could see them drafting a quarterback. Washington. Well,
folks, if you want to reach out,
the Commanders, previously known as the Washington football team. Despite the legendary Trevor Heineke plying his trade right now, I wouldn't be shocked if they brought in, a developmental quarterback to sort of grow up under him. We'll see.
Well, folks, if you want to catch up more with Bill, I suggest you follow him at Twitter right here, 11 Bravo, right there. And we're going to be back later in the week to talk more. Bill, what day? You're the boss. What day you want to do this? We can do it tomorrow, Wednesday?
I can pick up again tomorrow. And Wednesday, I'm doing MBS, National Nuts and Bolts Sports Draft Central with my partner, Jeff Barnes. And we will have some video from.
Is that Jeff Barnes from Dallas fame? Remember Jeff Barnes, the episode?
Yes.
Barnes?
Well, he is ironically a giant. He has, sorry, even though he's from New York, he is ironically a Dallas fan. But he is a fan of the Cowboys. But my co-host and partner, Jeff Barnes, and I will once again break down in fairly in-depth things we saw at the Senior Bowl, things we heard, what we thought of players. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other All-Star games, and we'll talk about trying to figure out who we think will be at the Combine. Some we already know because some schools and some players have posted the fact that they've been invited, but we're going to try to see if we can figure out, certainly at least at some positions, who the Combine invitees will be. So I'm available, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I've got other stuff. So I can definitely do tomorrow, though.
Tomorrow at, you want to try 6 this time or?
Sure. I mean, I was available, for that time, and you let me know what's going on with you.
Oh, hey, wait a minute. Joseph Amanduras has a quick question.
I have a quick answer, and I hope Joseph is doing well.
Joseph, how you doing? Joseph, you have a link. You could use the camera if you wanted to, rather than go hide behind the Godfather. Oh, here it is. He said, just turned in, but I want to know what both your thoughts are. The Texans hiring Lovie Smith. Do you think it was real hire or publicity stunt? Ooh. I have a lot of thoughts about Lovie, but in the interest of time, Bill, go ahead.
Okay, so I've had a few encounters with Lovie Smith, both in his iterations as a coach here and in his iterations as the head coach of my graduate school alma mater, University of Illinois, at Urbana-Champaign. He's an incredibly decent human being, first of all. I mean, I don't know, you probably won't find 10 nicer people in pro football than Lovie Smith. Incredibly wonderful man. Treats his players extremely well, cares for them, all that other stuff. Much like his mentor, Tony Dungy, he can sometimes have a bit of a blind spot when it comes to offense, but he understands defense at a super high level. My only concern is that sometimes he doesn't fit the scheme to the players. He'll sometimes try to make the players fit his scheme, but that happens with guys who really like their scheme. But the good news is he is a calming presence, right? Young players will trust and like him. Older players will appreciate that he treats them like decently, like men. I worry about what it might mean for the development of the young quarterback, Davis Mills. I would have gone if you wanted if we're keeping it to sort of veteran black quarterbacks, I would have gone Jim Caldwell there. But Lovey's not. You could do worse than Lovey Smith. I'll put it that way. I don't know if he'll be. I don't think he'll set the world on fire, but I think he might be able to build on what David Culley's done and win more games than expected, which may or may not be what they want. I mean, the Texans are kind of a mess, and I don't know how much time was spent on them, but he's not who I would have hired, but I think he might get some good things done there.
Now, I don't think, first of all, let me share what I know about Lovie Smith. Basically, I interviewed the man. This was Lovie Smith talking about drafting Jameis Winston. I'll play that for you, and then I'll give my thoughts after Lovie is finished. Right here. This is at the NFL owners meeting in 2015.
Chris Borman's decision.
That's Ira Kaufman, by the way.
One season, healthy, and walks away. Is that going to be a trend, Lovey, in your opinion, or an individual thing?
I think it's an individual thing. I was surprised, like everyone else. For Eddie DeBarlow's gala, Chris was there, so I talked with him about a couple of weeks earlier and congratulating him on the season he had. He was one of the guys this time of the year we were bringing to our facility. Got a chance to spend some good time with Chris. So it's a surprise, but we all know what's going on. Only Chris knows that, and
you respect the decision.
I have to respect a man's decision when he makes that. That just didn't happen overnight. Hey, I'm gonna retire from football after 1 year. Knowing how important football is to Chris, there's a reason for it, so you have to respect it and move on.
How successful do you think those initiatives have been, Lovey, for the numbers look like it's been effective.
There's no doubt. Like everything, constantly looking for ways to improve it. So totally feel good about what we're doing to improve the game.
In terms of safety.
In terms of safety, yeah.
Hey, Coach, under the new offensive coordinator, how will the Bucs offense be different this year? Is it too early to tell right now?
Well, with the success we had last year, I hope it'll be really different.
Schematically.
Schematically, the reason why I went with a guy like Derek Cutter, of course, I was on number one. I was on the other side when I think 59 points were put on the board against us. So I had a chance to compete against him for a long time. I thought that he has a broad scope of how offensive ball can be.
So this is a Machiavellian move.
To an extent it was. Yeah, to an extent it was. And for Derek, for us, him to have a background in Jacksonville of leading with the run, of having similar guys at the skill position in Atlanta, and just knowing him, he's a good football mind. He's hit the pavement running. It's been great so far. Can't wait to keep moving on with him. So very pleased with him being on our staff.
That shows a guy who works with the personnel that he has, right, Love?
No doubt. That was a part of it. But as much as anything, I was looking for a good football coach that could work with the staff and the players to buy into. And that's what we have.
We're known for explosive offenses, though, and particularly with wide receiver schemes, some creativity there. So your thoughts about his innovative?
Well, you kind of said it all. He is known for that. We need that. We need to be more productive on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, to special teams. And feel like we're heading in the right direction. We didn't really get a chance with some of the things that happened offensively this past year. But some of the individual signs that we're able to see. Mike Evans, as a rookie, having a type of year. We talked about the prospects of Austin Safari and Jenkins having Vincent Jackson, the remaining Vincent Jackson. Improving our offensive line. We feel like we can take it.
And finally, before I can your thoughts on Jameis Winston from a personal standpoint. Who do you think of the man?
As I've made the statement, totally confident with Jameis Winston. If he would, be a quarterback on our football team, we've done a lot of research on him. Everything is checked out. I realize he's made some mistakes, like he got himself in some situations that he would like to do over. We don't feel like, it's anything that we can't help him with. And I think he's going to be a very productive player in somebody's team.
Thank you.
You've watched
So I'm
so
going to stop
much
right
film
there.
of
I'll share that because
you probably didn't want
that's
to watch
Lovie Smith
film,
I'm
but
going to quit.
in action as head coach. And I think you're making the comment that, which Joseph I thought was really wrong. I just have to tell you. And I caution you against being influenced by white media. Remember, 70%. You're dealing with a situation where you have 70% of the NFL players are black, but 70% of the sports writers are white. And to describe a person like Lovie Smith as a punchline, no. I mean, what you heard in that, okay, is a person who has a fingertip feel for who does what. He can call on. Who admitted in that short time, hey, yeah, I'm looking at Dirk Carter because he hung 59 on us.
Yep.
And it was a Machiavellian move. Okay? And you can see right there the reason why he got the job, and it should never be considered a punchline. If anything, I'll argue that Mike McDaniel's the punchline because you're hiring a guy, and rather than tell me about his connections or qualifications or who you know, the first words out of your mouth about him is that he's biracial. That's racist, okay? It's not that he created, this isn't his fault, okay? But it's the environment. It's not his fault, it's the Dolphins. So don't talk to me about publicity stuff. Publicity stuff is the Dolphins not hiring Lovie Smith themselves. The Dolphins couldn't hire Lovie Smith. There is a reason why he is on his third job as head coach, because all is said and done. He understands which coaches to get to do a particular thing and how to, and not only that, also he knows to recognize when somebody knows something and he doesn't have to prove himself and answer. For example, I said to him, I said, my wide receiver screens and all of that. He just said, yeah, all that. That's smart. Okay? You know what he did? Hey, Bill, conversation with jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
He basically turned it around and said, oh, yeah, man, that sounds good. Hey, that's
right. I mean, he is sort of a. You did a good job. Everyone there did a good job of getting him to, because he tends not to. He's not one of those guys like Belichick who makes it a cat and mouse game with the media, but he also is a guy that you can tell that talking to anybody doesn't seem to be his favorite thing in the world. He's not a guy who.
Here's the thing. That was, and there's two videos there. There was more that happened at that discussion because Jason Cole was over there, and when the cameras were off, he was all but ballistic that they were going to go and bring in Jameis Winston. Jason has his own issues that, to me, are just one short of racism, and that he, well, I think it's too late to tell him he should have worked on it. I don't want to go there and say it at length, but I'll just put it out there, okay? There are a number of people who are in the business who come with an institutionally racist lens, and they don't do the NFL any favors, let alone themselves, considering the way society has advanced. All right, and so the conversation that we had, that Lovie allowed, including and the PR guy, was just a thing of beauty to be involved in. Lovie understood the moment. He understood the controversy. He understood his place in the moment, and he talked about it, which is, all that you can be expected to do. What people don't understand about being a head coach is that I think best expressed Jim Lee Howell, when he was coach of the Giants, described as a team. He had Lombardi for his offense and Tom Landry for his defense, and he had the luxury of being the ringleader in the middle, if you will. All right, and look, not every coach, even though I favor coaches who are innovators, not every coach has to be a schematic innovator. There's some people who are just brilliant at organization, and one of those people is Lovie Smith. But he's also brilliant at teaching and instruction taking the complex and explaining it simply. You can hear all that, and I hope that we all get to that place in our lives where we can recognize a person. Okay, Jameis is not going to the Texans. Again, we can recognize a person who knows his craft, and we know it enough to basically back off and say, okay, fine. And that's where I'm at. I mean, and I say that because I've seen that video a bunch of times, and I've looked at it different ways, and I look at it from the way of, wow, because I've been around enough, right? I'll be 60 this year, right, Bill? So you get to a point where you say, okay, he knows these things, and I wouldn't have seen it earlier, but now I see it.
Right.
I love the natural fit. What say you, Bill?
So, as I said, things that I really like, he's a steadying influence. I really do want to see who he brings in as offensive coordinator and QB coach. You know, they have a really intriguing second-year quarterback who I think only had 11 college starts at Stanford. So, first of all, kudos to him looking as good as he did with that not exactly great offensive line. And, you know, the surrounding talent around him doesn't look like he set the world on fire. I mean, I'm trying to think if the Texans had a single player on offense make the Pro Bowl, which isn't always the be-all, end-all, obviously. I mean, the Pro Bowl isn't the greatest way sometimes to tell how good a team is, but when your offense has 0 Pro Bowlers, that usually isn't a good sign. So they've got a lot of work to do in Texas, in Houston, to be exact. The good news is I think Lovey is a person that walks in with a plan. And not only a plan, but already knows how they want it executed. I think that you will see them be tougher on defense than they were the year previous, and a little more interesting on offense than they were the year previous. But
Bill, don't you think he's a stabilizing force in the organization? He's a guy that
right. That's exactly what he is. I said that before. He's a steadying influence.
He clears the chaos out of the way. You know, that's what a leader does.
Yeah.
Comes in and sets a tone, and makes everybody, particularly after a hellacious year, just kind of like say, okay, I think we can breathe now.
Right. And before I forget, rest in peace, Vincent Jackson.
Yes.
We lost him far too early at 38. And he was found to have had CTE, which may have contributed. I mean, who knows? But it may have contributed to his extremely chronic alcoholism that unfortunately helped to lead to his death. But what I would like to really focus on is in the future of this team. I mean, the Texans have done a pretty good job in past years of finding talent, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson, you know, J.J. Watt, DeAndre Nuke-Hopkins, you know, Will Fuller to a slightly lesser extent. You know, they found a couple of pretty good offensive linemen, a couple of pretty good defensive linemen, but it's really stood out to you when you looked at their skill position talent. How many of them are homegrown or were, in the case of the ones who've moved on. And then even on defense, you know, they had a couple of really outstanding players. But I wonder how sustainable some of these things will be. The good news, as we keep talking about, is people will like I said, will quickly come to appreciate, trust, and support, you know, Lovey as a coach. I think he will win over Texans fans in very short order. And if he puts together the right staff, and once again, you know, I don't know who will be on that staff. I certainly would be calling people like Pep Hamilton and Jim Caldwell. And Caldwell, frankly, should be a head coach, but I'd be calling anyway just to see if he would come with me anyway. But yeah, I mean, calls, right? I'm sure that's what's going on right now is calls are going out to various and sundry, you know, coaches that are out there on the market that still have something to give. But yeah, I mean, that's the main thing is I think Lovey, you know, he has a very high, I mean, his character is essentially impeccable. He has an incredibly high sense of you know, caring and compassion and morality. And when you add that to, you know, all the other things that he knows about defense that, you know, nobody ever needs to know all the things he knows about that defense. Like I mean, you could coach pretty well at a fairly high level with maybe 2/3 of the information in his brain that you would have in yours once the transfer took place. He's just an incredible, he's like almost like a living history book when it comes to defensive football. But as you make that transition from, skinny kid who shows up, whether it be high school, college, or even the NFL, when you show up, you're the least skinny or skinnier, right? When you show up at least. And that first couple of years for most players is spent, I say mastering it sounds funny, but I mean, there's a little bit of skill involved. And those that, are able to, no matter what it is, no matter what your skill is, no matter what it is you do, if you can, one, monetize it, two, keep getting better, keep improving. This applies to football, this applies to anything in life. And last but not least, be honest with your audience and yourself. You can do well. I think that whoever, whether Jameis ends up in New Orleans, stays in New Orleans, I should say, which I think is ideal, or whether he ends up going someplace else. Probably not the Texans, but, who knows? It depends on what she cares about more, right? But if indeed you are drawn to this business, what you and I do, Zenny, I strongly urge young people to do it. If you're in high school, get to know some of the players on your high school team and exchange information with them, because some of them will go off to college. Some might even be good when they go off to college. Now you've got this personal connection with somebody you can use to come onto your show or whatever it is you're doing. And, and then God willing, maybe one or two of them or somebody makes it to the NFL and they've got that connection there. Jameis Winston is one of the more talented quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life. Tremendous arm, real competitor, tough. Decision-making is the one thing. Like when you make a list of all the quarterbacks you've ever seen in your life and how he's in the top 3 or 4 in every way until you get to that, right? His decision-making wasn't always great. As you pointed out, there were some legitimate things in terms of the roster that didn't help him. But at some point...
No, I didn't point that out. What I point out was that he was the recipient of bad, stupid coaching.
Yes, I would agree.
And on a racist level, they had this idea that they're going to have this black guy with a strong arm throw deep to sell tickets because they had the opportunity to install a ball control passing offense and didn't do it until Tom Brady came along because he had, as they say, 6 rings. Then, and by the way, even the guy with 6 Super Bowl rings was getting intercepted the same rate of time as Jameis Winston in the same offense until they got him clue and said, we better change it. Okay. So, no, I give one thing you have to understand, and I'll explain why I say this off camera about Jameis Winston, is Jameis Winston wants to please the coach so he can keep the job. Therefore, it means if the coach is telling him to do something stupid, guess what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Exactly. Because
we're on the headgear, guys. It's about to get stupid.
The coach told him. Okay. So I'm not going to address the questions about Josh McCown because, again, I think I'm just going to say this straight out. I think the case, you don't mean this, but I think the assertion is racist. And I want you to watch a conversation I had with Jarrett Bell. If you haven't, please do. Here at Zenny62, because Jarrett wrote a column 2 weeks ago about how the media, and we're talking about a media that's mostly white, all right?
Yep.
This is Black History Month, time for truth, okay? Well, here's a 28-year veteran of USA Today who's black putting out a piece saying, hey, you know what? My colleagues are writing bad things about head coaching candidates who are black more often than white. He wrote that. He said it on my show. It's here on Zenny62 for you to watch. Okay? It's there. I say to everybody, take the red pill. This racism has got to be squeezed out of the National Football League like you're squeezing water out of a sponge because it's in the desert. Okay? A desert that is dry of truth. And we have to stop this stuff.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So as far as take us out.
Sure. So one thing I'm working on, and I'm doing an article for Around the Block Sports, and I think I will do a companion video for Z62 Media, is that there are so many really great Black coaches that never got the chance to be head coaches. From Willie Shaw, the father of David Shaw. I mentioned Terry Robisky when we were talking off air previously, and I mean there's a bunch. Eric Studesville, who deserves to be a head coach. There's so many, but the one that I wanted to really sort of mention or re-mention is Sherman Lewis. Sherman Lewis had an extraordinary NFL career as a coach, and there are 5 different points in his career you can point to and say, oh yeah, this must be when they finally made him a head coach. Like, there's no way this time he didn't get the job. And each time there was something, right? Some, or at least they pretended there was something, some reason, some whatever, there's something preventing. When you look at the way that he sort of began to really build his career, starting at Michigan State, obviously his alma mater, but from 69 to 82, then he becomes a running backs coach for Bill Walsh. They win 3 Super Bowls. He becomes the offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers, working for a guy who used to be under him, right? Mike Holmgren. I mean, there's a list of guys that have coached under him at some point in their coaching careers. But give you an idea of who some of them are. Mike Shanahan, obviously Steve Mariucci, and even Marty Mornhinweg, all pointed to him as being important in their early career development as coaches. He even made a run, came out of retirement in 2009, joined Washington as a consultant, working with Jim Zorn, eventually became the play caller. May hold the record, I have to confirm this. He certainly was one of the oldest, if not the oldest play caller in the history of the league. No, probably not no, I'm sure that's not record. I'm sure there have been guys older than him, but he was probably one of the 5 or 6 oldest in the history of the league, maybe less. My point is that this man should have been a head coach multiple times. Like, it should have happened a few different times. After he got done being a wide receivers and running backs coach at various points with San Francisco, he shouldn't have had to leave there to become an offensive coordinator. He shouldn't have had to go to Green Bay. And then when he's with Minnesota, I mean, there's so many different times he should have simply been elevated, and then he spent, 2 years with Detroit. Obviously, Detroit itself is a city with a strong and very rich Black history, dating back well over 150 years. And then finally, like I said, that one last run as offensive coordinator with the Washington 2009. I mean, they were hiring whoever as head coach in that period, for those who remember what Washington was doing and going through and whatever. Why wouldn't he have been as strong an option, if not a stronger option, someone like Steve Spurrier coming out of college? Yep. You have to explain that one to me. So that's the thing that I urge people to take with them. A lot of times we will say, oh, this is a money grab. Oh, this is bitterness. Oh, it's whatever. But what some people don't really seem to realize, a lot of times when people do something in their time, that they're able to do now, it's for guys that couldn't in the past. And I truly believe, especially since he's a pretty impressive student of the game, that on some level, whether it be, intentional and psychological, whether it be, maintenance or art or whatever it is, I would urge you to take a look at this man's life and career. And when you're looking at or judging or whatever it is, responding to, what's going on with Coach Flores' case or anything else that you see where a Black person who's in a profession where they're either the only one or one of a very few, and eventually someone says, hey, we've had 8 years have gone by, or how many years have gone by, and
you have the same number of coaches or maybe one or two more, but the distribution in terms of, getting to leadership levels, there's nothing you can tell me that won't make me, I will remember the life and career of, well, he's still alive, but the career of Sherman Lewis. And I will always point out to anyone who says, oh, it's not a big deal in, the Far East, or it's not big this, or no. Like, racism in some shape or form or fashion is practically everywhere, with the exception of extremely remote populations in places like the Marianas, chain, or, certain parts of like the Marshall Islands. But getting back to what I'm saying, this gets fixed when you decide to fix it. It's that simple. You can bring in Congress, you can bring in, Muhammad Ali, well, not Muhammad Ali anymore, but whoever it is, whatever famous person that you want to come in and tell people, hey, here's how you get organized, whatever it is. But to me, the real thing is learning from the mistakes that were made with Sherman Lewis, learning from the mistakes that were made with Willie Shaw and a load of other black assistant coaches, and say, you know what, we're going to give every single assistant coach who wants this opportunity a chance. Even if it's just a phone interview the first time, and they only do face-to-face or Zoom or whatever with those that make it past the first round of interviews, I'm fine with that. But I'm not fine with someone languishing in that silo, running back or wide receiver coach, because no one will allow them to move up. And that is my final thought.
There's just a delay. It will cause.
Oh, okay.
We can read that. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Go ahead. You sure? Or was that it?
Yeah, that was my final thought.
Oh, okay, cool. So, folks,
yeah, you said play us out or whatever. That's what that was.
We'll play it out. Hey, stick around the background.
I'll stick around for
great conversation, great questions. Subscribe to Zenny62 and visit oaklandnews.com right now. See ya. Thanks again.